Hey everybody, Chuck from Functional Fly Tying, and tonight I'm going to do a fly for you that's a little bit of a departure. We haven't done much in the way of saltwater flies, and so I'm going to start. And this is a almost stupidly simple pattern, but for those of you who fish in the surf, especially in Southern California, I think this is kind of a must-have pattern. And this pattern is intended to be an impression of a mole crab, which anything that cruises along the surf lines in Southern California, they love to scarf these things up like popcorn, whether it's halibut, barred surf perch, you name it, any species that cruise the beach, corvina, they're all looking for mole crabs. This is, as I said, a really simple pattern. There's only 3 materials to it. It's a little bit tricky though, because it's probably the only pattern that I can think of that I tie where you actually tie it backwards on the hook. But I think the time is worthwhile. So let's go ahead, get set up, and we'll start tying a mole crab. Okay, let's talk about what we're tying on here. The hook that you see in the vise is a Partridge Sea Prince in a size 4, and on there I have mounted a Pro Sport Fisher Flexi bead in a small, and I'm going to start by letting that bead drop back a little bit. And then the thread I'm using is a flat wax nylon in olive. And I'm just going to tie in right in the back. And the first material that I'm going to tie in, this is SF Blend in a wild olive color. And what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to impersonate that sort of tannish olive back on the mole crab. So I'm going to cut a bit of this. I'm going to bind that in. And then once I have that in place, I'm going to go ahead and whip finish that off. Notice that I'm having to kick the material out on every turn. That's the one problem with working backwards on flies, but for this one it makes it work better. And the reason we're doing this is we're going to have this orange, the egg sac, which is what the fish really cue in on. They are going to, you want this thing to be sitting up towards the eye of the hook so that the fly actually looks like it's sitting butt down in the sand. So I've got the SF Blend pulled off to the back, and now I'm going to go ahead and slide that bead forward, and I can go ahead and tie back in front of it. And this material is going to want to wrap around my bobbin on every turn, so I'm going to cut this short. I'm going to cut it about 2 to 2.5 inches long. It just makes it a little bit more manageable to work with. And then the next material that I have is just some tan chenille. It's a little bit heavier chenille, and it's got a little bit of sparkle to it. And I'm going to strip some of that away until I get to that cloth core. Let me trim away the thread tag first. And I want to tie this in by the cloth core because it helps secure that material in there. So I'm going to wind down just a little bit, fold it over, and then wind back up. Now that's locked in, so when I start to wrap it, it's not going to roll around too much on me. And then finally, I'm just going to create a thread base to just above where the barb of the hook is. Now that I have that in place, just simply go ahead and start wrapping that chenille. And notice that I'm pushing that right up against that bead so that it keeps it back in place, back by the eye of the hook. And then I'm wrapping this back with wraps that are very tight to each other, because I want this to be bushy. I want a little bit of volume to the fly. And then when I get back to that point above the barb, tie that off. Come in and trim the excess. And that's all looking good. So the next step I want to do is I want to start to build the carapace on the crab. So I'm taking, this is UV clear in the thin formulation. And I'm giving the top third of this or so a pretty liberal amount of that UV. And I'm going to go ahead and hit it with the light. And that's set up fairly firmly. So that's good. And this next step is really optional. If you want to try to make this look even a little bit more realistic, normally you can only see the egg sac from the underside of the crab. So I'm taking a Prismacolor marker in light olive green because the orange is going to make it darker than it would otherwise be. I'm just going to dab that marker on there just a little bit, just to kind of model that that orange color a little bit up on top. Like I said, that step is purely optional, because now what we're going to do is we're going to take that SF blend, and first of all we're going to kind of spread it out so it goes across the top. And then we're going to pull this forward right up over the top of the fly. But I'm going to check to see if that is spread out. I don't want it sitting right just up on top. I want it to cover more or less that same area where I inserted the UV glue, so that it creates the look of a carapace that comes all the way up and around the fly. Pick up any stray pieces and tie that off. And after you whip finish it, trim the edge, trim the thread, excuse me. And then I'm going to take this last little bit that's down here. Now mole crabs are filter feeders. So what they do is they burrow down into the sand, backside first, and then they have antennae that stick up out of the sand, and they filter feed. So we want to leave a little bit of the impression of those antennae. So I've thinned that out just a little bit. I'm going to spread those so that resembles the forward claws and that antennae. And now I'm going to come back over the top again. With a thinner coat of the UV. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to do two coats. This first one is to try to achieve a relatively smooth base. So I'll give this a good probably 12 to 15 seconds. If I tried to put too much on too soon, then it would have a tendency to not set up quite as well. And then I'll come back one more time. And this final coat just sits up on top and gives the look of that really smooth carapace like you would see on the crab itself. Now, this is a fly that does not have to look perfect because the fish that are feeding on these are coming in on incoming waves, and they're trying to pull these things out of the sand as the water and the tides allow. So they have very, very little time to make a decision on feeding here. So a hyper-realistic impersonation really does no good. They've got a split second to either eat it or not. And quite frankly, if you have a little bit of olive there, and then you have that bright orange to replicate the egg sac, that's all it's going to take. So there it is. Super simple pattern. We'll catch a lot of fish in the bay. The other nice thing is that with all the epoxy and everything, it gets down to the bottom very quickly, and that's where you want this. You want to fish it right against the sand. So there you have it. There's the mole crab. Hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you did, please click on the subscribe button to get automatic notifications of new videos that come out, and check out my website, www.functionalfly.com. Have a good one.